Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk you through 10 things that you must do as a medical student. If you're new to my channel, then welcome. Here you'll find loads of information about medical careers, in particular general practice, and I also provide content for aspiring medics. As always, if you like the video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, then why not consider subscribing? There's loads of videos that I'm sure you'll find useful, and if you're going to subscribe, then don't forget to turn the notification bell on so you don't miss out on any future videos. One of the reasons I decided to do this video was because I had a lot of requests for a number of different things, and I thought that a video like this would be good to include everything. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is studying. Now, I have mentioned a few study tips in a previous video, and if you're interested, then you can click on the link above. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is being organized. Now, if you don't know already, being a medical student means that you have a lot of information to get through. And so it's important to be organized, and that way you can stay on top of everything. For me, when I was at medical school, and even before medical school, I had loads of folders, loads of separators, just so that I could keep on top of everything, basically. So my first top tip is to really stay organized. Although I'm talking about studying, just in relation to being organized, it's really good that you create a plan for university, even if it's just going by year, definitely for your first year. Just decide on a few things that maybe you want to get involved with. What are your main aims for this year? What do you want to achieve? And I think writing things down, having a plan is a really good starting point to success. Okay, now I know it can be very difficult when you've got so much information and you don't know where to begin, you don't know how much to read, you don't know how much you should actually read around a particular topic, but I would always say that the lecture notes are a really good guide, and I wouldn't read too much more beyond this. Of course, there are things that you need to delve into a little bit deeper, but because you've got so much information, I really wouldn't get too caught up on going into a topic into too much detail. I mean, I've done it and it didn't work out very well, so I'm speaking from experience. Books such as the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine is really good because it does give you everything you need to know, and literally everything is like in a page or a couple of pages. So use books like that, which are very concise, to be your guide, and use the lecture notes to be your guide, and really read a little bit around the lecture notes, but I wouldn't overdo it. Honestly, you're not going to do yourself any favors. So like I said in my previous video, it's really important to use a variety of resources. This is where you need to know about yourself and your learning style. I personally use a lot of flashcards. I have so many flashcards that you would probably laugh, because I found that flashcards were a way to help me really learn, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later in the video. But use resources, use videos, use podcasts, use flashcards, use loads of different things to really help consolidate and cement your learning. Now, I know it's not always possible, but I would strongly recommend that you work in groups where you can. So when you're in clinical years, working in groups is a must. You can't really do OSCE practice if you're not in a group, even if it's with one other person. You need to practice examinations, you need to practice taking histories, even just running through clinical skills. You need to work in groups or in pairs at least. When you're in preclinical years or studying things that are not clinical skills or examinations, for example, it's still important to try and use group working as much as possible and use it to your advantage. Even if, like we know, there's a lot of information in medical school to get through, if you can divide this up amongst, say, 3 of you, one person learns about endocrinology, or if it's a particular topic that you're learning in endocrinology, or the thyroid gland, maybe someone can look at the medications and talk about the pharmacology and talk about new medications that you must know about, and then just divide it up, because that will really save a lot of time. And I wish that I had done that before. I wish that I didn't just do it for clinical years. I wish that I had got together with some of my friends and we had divided up the work, because that would have saved me a lot of time. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some specific study methods that have, from what I've seen, some evidence base surrounding them. In some cases, more research supporting particular study methods than others. You may have already heard of them. You may already be using these methods, but you don't even know about it. When I was studying for my A levels, I was using methods called active recall and spaced repetition, but I didn't know they were called this. I was just using them because they helped me remember the information that I needed to remember, and these set me up for basically doing this again throughout my medical schooling. So if we talk about, say, active recall, what this is basically you're forcing yourself to remember information by using questions. You're forcing your brain to engage. Often what we can do is we can fall into the trap of reading a book, reading information, and then our brain kind of switches off sometimes, especially if we're not taking regular breaks. So what you have to do is you read the information, you can do that, that's not a problem. But then you need to answer questions. And what I used to do, again, going back to A levels, is that, let's take biology for example. I would read chapter 1, and while I was reading I would make notes, but I wouldn't make notes in the ordinary fashion. I would make notes in terms of questions. And so by forcing yourself to answer questions, you're enhancing your memory, and you will find that you're able to remember much more, and at a faster rate than if you were just reading passively. The next thing I also did was spaced repetition. Now, like I said, I didn't know it was called this, but I just did it because it helped me. What I realized very quickly during GCSEs and A levels was that there was so much information, and then the next week I would just forget everything, and I would spend hours and hours revising, and then the next 2 days I would just forget it all, which was very frustrating, and I'm sure you've encountered the same thing. So what I decided to do was, let's go back to biology. If I was reading chapter 1 on one weekend, then I would read it, make my flashcards or make my notes, and then I would say, okay, well, I've done it this week, then maybe next week I will revise it again. Now, what you do find with this method is that, obviously depending on how you do it, you have more to go over each time. But what you will find is that you become quicker at remembering things. If, say, I was doing chapter 1 and then I would read chapter 2 next week, but I would have to re-revise chapter 1, then when I got to, say, week 4 revising chapter 1, I'd be done in 10 minutes. So I found that it would be much quicker for me to remember things, and I would cement and keep that information in my mind. So there are just a few things that you can implement in what you're doing now to really enhance your learning and how successful you are at memorizing and ultimately doing well in your exams. Now, I believe Anki flashcards do something similar, or maybe do it better. I don't know. It's obviously more of a digital format, and I haven't personally used Anki flashcards, so I can't really recommend them. But if they work on the premise of what I was just talking about, then I would say that they're definitely worth looking into. So those are just a few of my tips for how to study effectively. If you want more tips, I'm happy to provide you with some more. Just message me in the comment section below, and I will do another video or I'll respond to you with some particular techniques. There is no magic formula, which is the bottom line. I think a lot of us know anyway that to be a doctor, you don't necessarily have to be the top of the class. You just have to be really good at memorizing large amounts of information and applying things. So I hope you can use some of the methods and what I've talked about today to help you in your work and your revision, and please let me know if they've helped. Top tip number 2 is working together and making lifelong friends. You're going to be at medical school for 5-6 years, maybe longer depending on your path, and so it's really important that you work together. When I was at medical school, of course I had friends, but I often found that there were many people, and even before medical school, even just trying to get into medical school, I found that there were a lot of people who were very secretive. They didn't want to share information. We all want the same thing. You guys all want the same thing. Ultimately, either you want to get into medical school or you want to then become a doctor. Yes, it's going to be competitive, and yes, we all want to be the best, but ultimately we want the same thing. We want to be doctors. So it's really important you remember that, and remember to work together. No one did anything by themselves. Even the greatest of people needed help from other people. So I think you'd be really silly to not want to work with other people. And I think being a doctor, we have to work together. We have to work with colleagues, with other doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals. It also helps you because you need to develop the skills to work with others, like I said, for your future careers. So try and start this now. Tip number 3, get published. So again, I've done a whole video on how to get published, how to get your first publication. If you don't have a mentor, if you have no prior publishing experience, I have so many useful tips for you, so make sure you check that video out. I didn't get published as a medical student, and it really didn't impact me that much, especially when I was applying for my foundation training. If you look at the criteria which I'm showing you now, the majority of the points come from your performance as a medical student, and you only get 2 points maximum for getting published. But of course, we all know how much points, even if it's 1 or 2, do help your application. Like I said, I didn't get published as a medical student, and one of the reasons was because I didn't know how to get started, and it would have been really useful to me if I had a mentor or if I had a video like the one I've done recently. So look at that video. Getting published is a must, but like I said, if you don't get published, then don't worry about it too much. You'll have many opportunities in which to do this later on in your career. And like I've also said, the majority of your points come from your medical school performance, not from getting published. And I got my second choice placement when I was applying to the foundation training program. And like I said in my previous video, it actually worked out better location wise. So I was actually grateful I got my second choice, not my first choice. So I was asked to provide some tips for clinical placements. Now I know with the current situation, a lot of you will have some virtual teaching sessions, some virtual placements. I know certainly for the medical students that I'll be teaching soon, the first few sessions will be virtual. So I'm going to provide you with a few top tips to maximize your clinical placements. So the first thing I will say is to be prepared. I know for me, when I used to go to clinics especially, it's really good if you read up beforehand. Now, there's only so much you can read and there's only so much you can know. And you're there in the clinic or on the ward to learn. But it will be really good for your own learning if you read up, even if it's a chapter or even if it's just about maybe the medication or the definition of the condition and management. It's really useful if you read beforehand because you'll be able to follow things much more easily than if you go in and just say, well, I'm just gonna see how it goes. I would definitely go in with a plan and read something beforehand. If we take heart failure, for example, maybe know how to define heart failure, the different types of heart failure, know about the clinical signs and symptoms, know about management. So what test would you like to perform, BMP, echo, etc. So just have some brief, concise notes and try and remember that, and then I'm sure you'll do really well and you'll make the most of your clinical placement. The next thing I will say is to make notes, whether that's electronic or written. One thing I will say about electronic, if you are going to use your phone, then just kind of make the consultant or make the doctor aware, because in the past when I was using my phone, someone thought that I was doing something I shouldn't have been, like on social media, when I was actually taking notes. So if you're going to use something electronic like a mobile device, and make sure that you kind of tell the doctor that this is what you're doing. Writing notes is really important. I would just make, again, some key concise notes, what you saw, and then maybe how you're going to read up about that later on. But yeah, don't overdo the notes again. Just things to refresh your memory, because sometimes you go to loads of clinics or loads of different things and you'll forget. So maybe this is what I saw today, this is what I'm going to read up on later on, key things, and just keep them really, really short. I would also say when you're writing your notes, not in the clinic or in the hospital, but when you're away from that area, then just reflect on what you've seen, reflect on a number of different things. One could be, how could you have done things differently perhaps? Reflection is really important as a doctor, and it's something that we all have to do for our entire careers. So the sooner you get used to reflecting and reflecting well, then the better for you. So be enthusiastic. I know sometimes you're tired. I know sometimes you're not interested in this specialty or whatever it is, but honestly, it really not only helps you to try and stay enthusiastic, but it helps the teacher. If I've got someone in front of me who looks bored, who's yawning, then I'm not really going to enjoy teaching them, and I really want to, and I love teaching. So try and be enthusiastic, try and find some way to stay engaged and to say, well, how can I use this to help me in my future career? How can I use what I'm hearing and what I'm learning today? How can I use it in some shape or form? Because more often than not, you will be able to use the information, even if it's 1 or 2 points that you can take away. The other thing I would say is be polite, show respect to everyone when you're on placement, and that goes not just only to the doctors, the nurses, the cleaners. And the other thing I would say is, if you haven't already read Good Medical Practice, then make sure you read that by the GMC. I would also highly recommend thinking about the career aspects when you're on your placements. Many of you may not know what specialty you want to go into, or you may have a fixed idea, but then actually you're in that specialty and you think, not really for me, or you see another specialty and think, actually this is really interesting, I might want to do it. So it's really good, speak to the doctors, ask them about the practical aspects of the career, of the job, and then use this and think about it when you're making your own decision. Now, I've spoken about flashcards. Now, for me, flashcards were really good because they were very portable, so I could take them with me. I mean, now you can do these on your phone, I guess, but I would take paper flashcards with me, because we all know that there are times when we spend a lot of time waiting around and nothing happens, which can be very frustrating, especially if you've got an exam coming up and you want to spend that time revising. Take some work with you, just a small amount of work. So if you are waiting, even if it's a book, you can read up on something that maybe you're rusty on or that you're not sure about, and just make use of the time, really. The other thing I would say is, maybe if you have access to the library, go to the library until whatever happens. Or you could even go and grab something to eat and just have a rest and just switch off for a minute. You could also network with other people while you're waiting, and that includes patients. So maybe you might want to speak to a patient, ask them how they came about coming to the hospital, what they're being treated for, how are they doing generally. Speak to the other doctors, maybe not doctors attached to your firm, and then maybe some of the doctors could sign off clinical procedures for you, or even just give you some advice. I would also say that when you're on your placement, help. When I've had medical students in with me, they've been a massive help if they've decided to help. So if they've decided to, for instance, call the patient. I know I used to do that when I was a medical student sitting in clinic. I would get the couch ready, I'd put any rubbish away, I would call the patient, I would introduce myself to the patient if I was calling them in. I mean, it does depend on the consultant or the doctor that you're in with, but maybe you could ask them, would you like me to do this, this and this? And sometimes they'll tell you. I think it's really good if you can help. It not only makes you feel good and proactive and like you're doing something, but it also helps your future colleague. So always think about how you can help. Also give feedback. This transcends across not only your medical degree, but also when you're a doctor and say, when you're in training and training programs, because feedback is so useful. Don't just sit there and think, oh, well, this placement was rubbish, but I'm moving on, so I'm not going to really give any feedback. I don't really care. Giving feedback is useful because it helps the medical school know what's working and what isn't working, and it helps your fellow peer, it helps your fellow colleague. Because if you found that the placement hasn't been ideal or you weren't treated very well, so the next person coming after you may also find that problem, which isn't good, and it's not how you should be working. So give feedback, good and constructive feedback, and make sure you know how to give constructive feedback, and this will definitely help the people coming after you. I would always recommend going on call, not only so you can see how on calls work, but because they're really good environments for learning. Although they can be quite busy, and it does depend on the type of on call, or if it's medicine or surgery, you will always learn something from being on call with the on call team. So go to the on calls and maybe do 1 or 2 nights, maybe even a part of a weekend, but really do on calls because they're really good learning environments. Now, in terms of virtual placements, it can be a little bit tricky, and it just depends on the type of placement that you're taking part in. And if you want me to talk about virtual consultations in a bit more detail, then let me know in the comment section below and I will put together a video for you. So I was also asked to speak about intercalating. Now, I intercalated at UCL. It was compulsory at the time. I wasn't keen on intercalating because it was an extra year, but it was compulsory, so I had to do it. But looking back, it was definitely a good thing to do, and this is my next top tip. You should intercalate. I would definitely recommend it. There are many reasons too. Before I get into the reasons, I will talk about my degree. I mean, it was a while ago, so I can't remember every single thing. I intercalated in speech, science, and communication. As the name suggests, it was all about communication, language, gesture, development in children and how they communicate in their language. And it was really interesting. I think when you do a year, it's a very short degree. You may forget quite a lot of what you've done in that degree because it was just a year, and then you go back into the medical degree. So I think there are definitely positives because you can learn about a particular topic in more detail, especially if you're interested in it. Say, I don't know, pharmacology or physiology, for example. And there are a lot of different topics, different degrees on offer. So I definitely have a look around and maybe even think about doing something different. Maybe even something like global health or even management or leadership in healthcare, in medicine. And some universities do allow you to go to another university, so that would be good as well. The other benefits of intercalating would be, of course, to help your foundation application, because you have a chance to get published, which is really good. And it does, the actual degree itself, depending on if it's a first class, second class, etc., can also help you with your application, which I'm just showing you again now how that works. So there are definitely benefits to intercalating in another degree. You can also gain another qualification and develop loads of different skills, which will definitely help you as a doctor. So think about it, and I would definitely recommend it. So tip number 6, societies. There are so many societies, and if there isn't one that you like, then make one. Societies are really good because yes, they allow you to delve deeper into a particular area, whether that's surgical skills, for example. You also meet new people. And like I said, you can create a whole new society if you have enough people to do it, I guess. And also join societies for fun. They don't always have to be about extra learning. And you've got 6 years, maybe 5 years at university, so make the most of it. And I would definitely recommend getting involved in societies, and as many of them as you can balance. So number 7 is teach. You must teach. You will probably have to do that anyway, but I would say the more teaching, the better. One of my frustrations in school, in medical school, was the lack of what I would say enough good teachers. I think as doctors, we're often thrown into teaching and we're not necessarily naturally good teachers, or we're not necessarily given enough support to be good teachers. As doctors, we always have to teach, whether that's each other, whether that's medical students, or other healthcare professionals. So please invest in teaching and becoming a really good teacher. Top tip number 8, have fun. Having fun is imperative. You will enjoy your medical degree much more. Yes, there's a lot of information to learn. Yes, you want to be a good doctor, you want to be a safe doctor, you want to be the best in your class. That's great, but also have fun. 6 years seems like a long time, and it is, but it also goes very quickly and you can't get that time back. I often miss UCL. It may sound sad, but I do. It was a really good time in my life, although it was very challenging. So make the most of it, have fun. It's not all about studying. I know things aren't what they used to be in terms of traveling, but my next top tip is to travel where you can. You can go to other parts of the UK. You have a lot of time in your medical degree in which to do this, and also you have your elective in final year. So if you can travel and travel safely, then I would definitely recommend to do this while you're a medical student. When you start working as a doctor, you'll have less and less time in which to travel, so make the most of it while you can. My final tip is to look after your mental health, look after yourself, be kind to yourself. It's not an easy environment being in medical school because of the constant exams, the constant desire, the constant pressure that you place on yourself and other people place on you to do well. In the previous video, I've spoken about mental health among medical students and doctors. So we know that it's there. We know that medical students, maybe like yourself, are frightened to speak out about your mental health because of the stigma, because you are afraid that it may impact your future career. But if you are struggling, then please go and seek help. Prevention is better than cure. So if you can find ways to prevent yourself becoming ill with a mental health condition, then of course. But everyone suffers from mental health at some point in their life, and it's not something that's easy to prevent either. So number 1, try and prevent developing anxiety and depression. But number 2, if you do happen to become anxious or become depressed or some other form of mental health condition, then please seek support. I have less information for you to check out if you do need that help. So those are my top tips. I hope you found them useful. I'm always interested to hear your comments. Like I said in the video, if you want me to do some more videos based on some of the things I've spoken about today, then let me know and I will look into that for you. And if you found the video useful, then make sure you give it a thumbs up as always. And if you haven't subscribed, then why not consider subscribing? I have loads of useful videos that I'm sure you will enjoy. So I'll see you in my next video.